My name is Wesley Colford. My pronouns are they, them, and I have the honor and great weight of being the artistic and executive director of the Highland Arts Theatre here in Sydney, Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island, Unama'ki. In 2014, I made the likely dubious decision to return home to this beautiful island to engage in the creation of a not-for-profit theatre company. Despite the questionable nature of that proposition, we actually were surprised with resounding success. In our first year, we had over 15,000 people through our doors, which for an island with a population of 100,000 is pretty good, and commenced in the creation of turning this gorgeous 114-year-old former church into a state-of-the-art performance venue. By 2019, we had produced dozens of local professional productions and really saw a huge rise in the local art scene. We were poised to have our greatest year yet with an operating budget of over $1.5 million, and then it was March 2020. Within a second, everything, of course, ground to a halt. Gathering was made illegal. All of the plans for the year were completely postponed or canceled, and everything that we'd hoped became impossible. Of the $1.5 million I'd mentioned in the previous year, 85% of that had been from ticket revenue. And despite the fact that we were a not-for-profit and, in fact, a registered charity, we had no significant government funding at the time and were very much at our wits' end as we suddenly found ourselves in a very, very different new world. I have to say, it's obviously that the pandemic changed everything for everybody. And as we looked at the world around us halting, we took this as not just a major pivotal moment, pardon the pun, but a chance to reflect, to look at our values, to say, what are we doing and what aren't we doing? And if we are coming back, how can we make it better? There was a lot of talk in that period about the new normal, and especially as things eventually began to reopen, it seemed that a lot of this new normal was actually a lot of the same previous normal or a lesser normal, a reduced normal. And as we saw institutions and governments come back with a lot of talk and brave promises, actually not really coming forth on the same failed institutions that had disappointed us before, we knew we couldn't just do that same thing again. At this point, we saw the horizon that there were soon going to be events that would be allowed to happen, but because of the substantial physical distancing, our 400-seat venue would be able to hold at max 50 people, and if we were going to even break even on these shows, we would have to increase ticket prices by 400%, which of course, at that time especially, nobody was going to even fathom paying. So instead of doing that, we did something bold, perhaps foolhardy, and ultimately incredibly supportive. Rather than raise our prices by 400%, we made all of our tickets 100% free for the entire community. We launched in June 2020 a fundraising crowdsourcing campaign called Radical Access with a live telethon that performed at our theater that was completely empty. We launched with a brave plan that we knew was certainly risky and perhaps would fail, but we knew if we were going to have any chance to stand up to our values and make our mark, this was the best chance to do that. Essentially what we promised was if we received enough donations from the public, we would make, first of all of our main stage productions free for everybody to come and witness. We also had a series of other, I guess we call them stretch goals that I'll talk about in a second. And really this, although certainly radical, was not terribly out of line from everything we've been doing for the previous 6 years. From the conception of the Highland Arts Theatre in 2014, accessibility was one of our absolute tantamount values. It was certainly inspired and informed by a lot of my work in Toronto, where it was not uncommon for people to pay $60, $100 for shows that they might not necessarily like and certainly don't know about before they go. And to me, that plays into the stereotype of theater being an elitist, very select audience, which is the antithesis of what my theater is, what I believe theater to be, and what honestly I believe theater has been from the history. From the very beginning, thousands of years ago, it was meant to be the gathering place for an entire community, a place where the stratospheres of class are completely absolved, where lawyers and doctors and janitors and people who sing songs on the street all get to sit together in a place where they probably don't know many people, And in the dark and silence, 400 strangers can breathe the same air and listen to stories and laugh and cry and be. And that's something that we very rarely get to do. So, June 2020, we launched this idea of radical access, swept Cape Breton. We very quickly found not just local success, but across the country, hundreds of people started signing up for monthly donations. In very short order, we had people from literally across Canada, also from the United States, from Europe, Wales. It was a very exciting time, and news eventually got word to the Globe and Mail, which wrote about us several times, as well as eventually the New York Times. The Globe and Mail actually, at the end of the year, named me specifically as a Canadian Arts Hero of 2020, alongside Canadian luminaries such as Margaret Atwood and Dan Levy from Schitt's Creek. So a very proud moment for me, yes. As the program unveiled itself and rolled out, we had about 35 productions on our main stage, absolutely free of charge over the next several years, including brand new world premiere plays by local Cape Breton playwrights, Canadian classic theatre like Billy Bishop Goes to War. Daniel McIver, who is one of Canada's great theatre makers, actually did his solo show House as our very first Radical Access season. He happened to be available because his long stint at Stratford was canceled due to the pandemic. And along with all of those shows, as we were eventually allowed to have more numbers in the theater, big Broadway musicals as well, like Into the Woods and Cabaret. So once again, all of these were free, and not just for the people who had committed to donations, but to the entire community, which obviously was very successful. Along with the tickets being free, which is sort of the headline item, we had all kinds of other, as I said before, stretch goals. This included 100 scholarships to the local youth for free tuition and education in arts, performing arts, otherwise, people that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford any of these activities. We also started a brand new Canadian playwriting competition in honor of the very wonderful Rita Joe, another Unama'ki incredible artist. We are currently workshopping and plan to produce that play, as well as we have produced at this point 3 original productions at budgets that are quite significant for our local Indigenous Mi'kmaq artists, led by just some of the most talented people I know. And it's worth noting these productions are not only among the most attended shows we've done since the pandemic, but have also been highly award-winning, and we're so proud of the work of Sarah Prosper and the entire team on these shows. There's lots of other things as well that were part of the program, but if you want to look that up, you can go to our website. The point being, this was an incredible time. From the dust of what might have been the end of a very important institution, we were doing more work than we'd ever done, and we were in fact making it completely free, which is so counterintuitive, and yet this turned into very much a golden age in our evolution. I have to say it was surprising, some of the criticism that we encountered, which it was not a lot, but there were people that had very strong reactions to this whole idea and were very vocal about them. And it wasn't necessarily people I would have expected, people that were maybe politically opposed or I don't even know what I would have expected. What surprised me was that a lot of these critics were artists, people that had been very supportive of us in the past. And the big thing that I was told again and again was that if we make our ticket prices free, we're going to devalue the art. And I understand why that would be perhaps the logic, but I actually completely disagree. And for myself at least, it is in fact the opposite. When we look at the most important things in our society, we look at healthcare and public education and libraries, Facebook maybe. These are things that are free, not because they're not important or unvaluable, but because they are so essential to our daily lives, and because Facebook makes a lot of money selling all of our personal information. But theater, to me, falls in that category. There's a reason that for thousands of years we have gathered in caves and in front of fires and told stories. We need that human connection. We need to be able to gather with our art, not just witness it or write something in isolation, but to come together. It's one of the reasons every society and civilization in history has had some version of performing arts. Now, in 2020 and throughout the entire pandemic, obviously there's a lot of conversation around essential workers and what that means. And absolutely, with great justification, we gave many accolades and reverence to doctors, people preparing and delivering food, so many of these essential services that saved what bit of society was existing at that point. And as someone who makes theater for a living, it was very easy to give over that spotlight and to take a lesser space throughout that, to the point that it almost became disheartening with a number of my colleagues, where theater was one of the first things to be shut down, it was one of the last things to be brought back. For a lot of that time, it was certainly a very isolating experience, and it felt like maybe no one actually cares or needs what we're doing. And yet, when we went into lockdown the very first time, one of the first things that I witnessed was so many of my colleagues and strangers on the internet recording songs, recording dances, posting tutorials, creating content. We had musicians on balconies doing impromptu performances for empty streets to the rousing cheers of people from windowsills and balconies. Every musician I know was doing live streams on Facebook, again, completely for free, because we needed that artistic connection. We needed not just a movie or a Hollywood blockbuster, but someone who we knew personally in our community who was reaching out beyond even the screens of our lives to say, I'm there and I see you. We live in an embarrassment of content. We, right now, get to benefit from a near infinite catalog of probably all of recorded artistry of the world of human history, which we can access mostly for free at any time, thanks to this plastic rectangle we keep in our pocket. And yet, despite the many temptations of YouTube and Netflix and Paramount, the home of all Star Trek series, we still crave that human interaction. We still pay a lot of money and spend a lot of energy and put on pants to go out to see concerts, to see plays, to see musicians, and all kinds of performers that we could very easily get probably a better caliber of content by watching the latest binge-worthy series. And yet, clearly there's something that harkens back to that ancient time that we do need, that makes us feel alive. And that, to me, is essential. I also will say theater, in my opinion, is the greatest source and encourager of empathy beyond any art form. It's something that, unfortunately, I think is very lacking in our society that is increasingly polarized, easily triggered, and increasingly binary. The fact that you can go and hear someone else's story and feel feelings and empathize is something we don't teach in school. We don't have a lot of opportunities. And yet again, by gathering with strangers and telling these stories, we get to see their point of view, which, if anything, is going to save the ever-increasing Twitter hellscape that is 2024. I have to hope that that increase in empathy is one of our greatest assets. All of this these are things I've believed my entire life. They're things that have certainly informed my career and my work at the Highland Arts Theatre and otherwise in theater, but it was really this time that made me realize not only is it important to me, but clearly it is important to people. There were hundreds and then thousands of people, literally strangers across the world, who were listening to our story, buying into our concept of a radically accessible live performance venue, and supporting it in a way that made me rethink so many things that otherwise had been assumptions. And that's the biggest thing I hope you get from this, is that the things we buy into, the stories we tell ourselves, and the way we live our life out of habit more than anything can be challenged. There can be an alternative. So where does that leave us? In our world, I see we are increasingly consumed by consumerism, by capitalism. There are luxuries we've previously been afforded that we no longer can afford, and in fact, even the necessities of life are increasingly impossible to afford, things like basic foods and transportation, thanks to inflation and all of the various things we're dealing with. It's a struggle, and I have to ask, how much longer can it continue? How much longer will we continue to buy into this myth that has gone without challenge for certainly my lifetime? I offer that an alternative is possible, and we have evidence that through this program, through Radical Access. these are, again, many of the shows that we were able to present over the last 3 years. It's been an incredible time. What I haven't told you yet is the success of this program. In the first year, we raised $600,000 towards Radical Access, which not only saved our venue, but in fact funded all of the various things, all of these productions, all of the programs I've been talking about for the past 18 minutes. In the years after that, I guess leading up to today, we've raised more than $2 million, all of which has gone back into the community through these programs, through paying our artists, through supporting these programs. And it goes without saying, I'm sure our costs are exorbitant. It is a very old, very beautiful, but very old and very cold building that we have to heat. And as inflation continues, those costs only continue to become more and more exorbitant. Unfortunately, also in the years since 2020, every year we do lose some of our donations, and I of course understand as people's purse strings are tightened, it becomes hard, and sometimes donating to wonderful theaters is a luxury that has to also be in the chopping block. That said, we are here. We continue to thrive. This year we are celebrating our 10th anniversary, which is absolutely surreal, and we've done all of these things, almost all of which has gone back into this community and paid back all of the people who have believed in us. I absolutely believe in this concept. It's changed over the years, but we still produce almost every month a main stage production. There are still free seats for every performance. We have pay-what-you-choose pricing. We have free web streams, which you're all welcome to check out via our website. We also continue with our 100 scholarships every year. So many, all of these programs I've talked about continue in different ways, none of which would have been possible without the initial funding of Radical Access. But more importantly, I want to leave you with this consideration. And again, if you aren't a theater lover, if you don't care about what's happening on a small island on the east coast of Canada, what I hope you'll take away from this is that there are alternatives that are possible. And if you have the courage, it does work to go into your community, to invite everyone, and to say, come into the dark and light a candle and breathe the same air with 400 strangers and sing songs and tell stories, cry, and maybe if you're very lucky, they'll give you what you need to soar. Thank you very much.